Hey there, it's Jason from Codemanship with another video diary entry. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying these videos or finding them useful, and ring the bell for notifications for future videos. So I innocently, it's never really innocent with me, but I innocently posted a question on the Codemanship Twitter account and also on LinkedIn, asking people, how do you feel about changing legacy code, about working with legacy code? And there were lots of different sentiments in the replies, but the one that came up quite often was along the lines of, I'm okay with it as long as I'm allowed to refactor. I think that's a very interesting way of putting it, as long as I'm allowed to refactor. Now, if you know me, if you follow this channel, or if you follow my blog or my social media accounts, or if we work together or we met, you may well be aware that I do not believe developers should need permission to refactor. For the same reason that I don't believe that people working in restaurants should need permission to wash dishes. It should be considered part and parcel of the job of writing code. If you watch me work, you'll see me refactor many times an hour, day in, day out, basically. It's just part of the way that I write code. It's cleaning up after myself. The alternative to not refactoring is to get everything perfect first time. And good luck with that. So it's an important part of the job. If we want to make sure that our code is easy to understand and easy to maintain, then we need to put some effort into keeping it that way. And that's called refactoring. I think maybe the sentiment and some of the arguments that ensued from people who called me arrogant for suggesting that developers should be able to refactor without permission. I think one person used the phrase unsanctioned refactorings, which is a nice one, possibly comes from a misunderstanding about what that word means. So if we go for the dictionary definition, or the definition in Martin Fowler's book on refactoring, refactoring is improving the internal design of software without changing what it does, specifically with the goal of making the software easier to change, to make it easy to understand, and so on and so forth. It's an essential part of any programming process. If we accept that, like people working in the kitchen, we're going to get mess, we accept that we are therefore going to have to spend a considerable amount of time cleaning up after ourselves and cleaning up after our customers, in the case of a kitchen. And therefore, it's an essential part of the process of delivering working software. When we don't refactor, that process is not sustainable because our code just gets harder and harder to understand. It gets more and more complex. It gets easier and easier to break, and therefore it's broken a lot of the time. So we end up spending a lot of time debugging it, and we're not actually getting things done for our customers. So I see refactoring as essential. To me, refactoring is like using for loops or map reduce if you're one of those functional cats. It's just part of the job, and I don't feel the need to seek permission to do it. And the reason I don't feel the need to seek the permission to do it is because I happen to know that when, for example, I'm asked to change legacy code, if I do it in a disciplined way, if I refactor the code and write unit tests around it, it usually doesn't take me any longer to deliver the change that I've been asked to deliver. And that's because I'm not spending a lot of time downstream debugging the thing. So I've measured myself doing this. I've observed many teams doing this. If you're skilled in refactoring, and this is where I think the big difference comes, then it doesn't necessarily take you any longer to make the change. But the end result is much cleaner, much safer, and much more sustainable because you're adding fast-running tests, because you're making the code easier to change. Also, in the way that teams tackle refactoring, I see it as an ongoing process. You make some changes to the code, you do some refactoring, you pass a test, you do some refactoring, and so on and so forth. But some people don't do that. They just make mess. Basically, they're a restaurant that doesn't clean dishes, and then eventually they run out of clean dishes, and they have to stop everything and clean some dishes. And you may have heard these referred to as refactoring sprints or refactoring phases or things like that. They're an anti-pattern for two reasons. Number one, the customer notices. I've seen some really long refactoring sprints that went on in some cases for more than a year on legacy code. The end results are often disappointing because you're refactoring in a speculative way. So you're not saying, oh, I need to change this code, therefore it needs to be unit testable, therefore I need to break these dependencies and remove this duplication, etc., etc. What you're saying is we must refactor all the things that look bad, whether it helps or not, whether it makes change easier or not. So the results are very often disappointing, and you are making it your customer's business or your manager's business because you are stopping development. And when we stop development, that's kind of our lifeblood. That's cash flow, basically, for us, delivering stuff. Delivering working software, new features or changes to features or even bug fixes and that kind of thing. That's how we earn our money. When we stop delivering, that's kind of cash flow stopped, and customers notice and they get very disgruntled about it. You're sacrificing a lot of goodwill when you do that. So we don't recommend that you do that. Rather, in his book on working effectively with legacy code, Michael Feathers recommends a simple, it doesn't say easy, but it is simple, a simple process for making changes to legacy code safely and cleanly in a sustainable way, where instead of just refactoring all the things, you say, okay, I've been asked to make this change, therefore, in order to make this change safely, where would I need to write tests? In order to write those fast-running unit tests, what refactorings would I need to do to break any external dependencies, for example, that are getting in my way? Then you write the tests. Hooray for our side, we've now got more test coverage. Then you make the change the business has asked you to make. So you earn your money, earn your keep, keep that delivery flow going. And then while you're in there, now that you've got unit tests, maybe clean up a bit more, apply the Boy Scout rule. So leave the campsite tidier than you found it. So if there are other opportunities to simplify or make the code you're working on more readable or easier to change, take them while you're there. You don't have to spend days on it, just a little bit of time to make life easier for the next person. And the next person might be you. And then gradually over time, as you're still delivering changes for the business, you're still delivering value, but you're also turning that legacy code base around, adding more and more fast-running tests, making the code simpler, more readable, more modular, and easier to change. So I see refactoring as a background activity, a very important one that is going on all of the time. It's going on all of the time. I probably spend about half my development time refactoring. And you may look at that and go, well, he's wasting half his development time when he should be delivering features. But let's take a bet on that, shall we? Will I be delivering the feature faster than you? When I say delivering, actually working, fit for shipping, ready to go. Because I'm willing to bet that I'll get there before you. Because what I've got is tested. It works. And I know that it works because I've got tests around it. So I think there are many misunderstandings about refactoring, about what it really means, about the scale of the word. I think for some people, they view it as kind of a sort of a wholesale, sort of major architectural changes. We refactored our code into a microservice architecture. Well, maybe you did, but I'd be willing to bet that the way you did that was not refactoring. First of all, because there are no fast-running automated tests, so you weren't doing it in a safe way. But that's not really what refactoring means. Refactoring is a small-scale thing that can, over time, lead to large-scale results, but it works in the small. You do a single refactoring, you extract a method or rename something or extract a class, and then immediately you retest it. Even if you're testing it manually, you immediately retest it to make sure that it still works. And as a priority, you get to a point where those tests run fast. So you're not having to click the buttons yourself, for example. And then not only are you making those changes more safely in a disciplined way, but it also means going forward, you're leaving a legacy on your legacy code of fast-running tests and code that is much easier to change. So that's my belief. I'm interested to know what you feel. So if you want to make a comment below. I know people feel many different ways and have many different experiences of working on legacy code and of this thing called refactoring. But strictly speaking, it's these small, low-level changes that are always happening. They're happening many times an hour. We're refactoring, retesting, and that's why it's so important that your tests run fast, because if they don't, you can't do it safely, which is why it's so important to get those tests in place. And the most important message is, if you're skilled in refactoring, you will tend to find that it doesn't take you any longer to make the changes the business wants you to make. So why make it their business? Why seek permission for something that is in their interest and in your interest, and it isn't going to cost them any more, but it's probably going to save them money later? Why give them that choice? So I tend to find it's best not to have that conversation. Now, you might think that's arrogant, that some developer, albeit a very experienced one, has the nerve to think that he can be making these low-level design decisions or these architectural decisions without seeking permission from an architect or a manager or from the team. But that also comes down to trust, an issue of trust. Do you trust me to choose good, wise refactorings? The sign of a good refactoring usually is that it makes the change you're about to make easier. It might not be easier to get to that point, as Kent Beck puts it, make the change easy, which might be hard, might involve a bunch of refactoring and manual testing even, but then make the easy change. The important thing is you leave behind something that, number one, works, you've got confidence in it, but number two, going forward, you're confident that it's going to stay working no matter how many times we change it, and that's going to make it much easier and safer to change. So what are your thoughts? Comments below. Hope you're keeping safe, and until the next video diary, well, keep refactoring and don't ask for permission.